Welcome to our channel. Today we will explore a hypothetical scenario: what would happen if only men remained on Earth. We will trace the development over 100 years to understand how it would affect society, the economy, and culture. Demographic collapse. Immediately after the disappearance of women, childbirth would cease, marking the first alarming trend. In some countries, research and development of artificial reproduction technologies would begin, but results would be mixed. In the first 10 years, the population would start to gradually decline as new generations are no longer born. Politicians and scientists would urgently seek solutions, including cloning and the use of stem cells, but these technologies would still be in the experimental and developmental stages. After 10 to 20 years, the population would continue to age and shrink. Most of the remaining men would be over 50 years old. Artificial reproduction technologies might reach a level where creating new individuals becomes possible, but these methods would be limited and unable to fully compensate for the losses. Over the following decades, the population would decline to critically low levels. By the end of the century, the population would consist predominantly of elderly men. Cloning and artificial reproduction technologies might become more advanced, but their application would be limited due to ethical, moral, and resource constraints. The human population would be on the brink of extinction. Social and psychological consequences. In the first years after the disappearance of women, men would experience shock and stress. Social structures would begin to collapse as traditional family roles vanish. Levels of loneliness and depression would rise. After 10 to 20 years, society would adapt to new realities. Men would start forming new types of social interactions and support systems, but the mental health of many individuals would remain at risk. Levels of depression and anxiety would stay high, and psychological support would become an essential part of life. Over time, social structures would continue to adapt to the changed demographics. Psychological help would become more widespread and accessible. Men would seek ways to maintain their mental health and well-being through new forms of social interaction. By the end of the century, society would function under new norms and rules. Psychological support and therapy would become integral parts of life. Men would learn to live with constant stress and loneliness, but it would still impact their overall mental health. Ethical and moral dilemmas. In the early years after the disappearance of women, debates would begin about the necessity of using radical reproductive technologies. Cloning and the creation of artificial wombs would be considered possible solutions, but they would face significant criticism and ethical questions. Within 10 to 20 years, technologies might advance to a point where cloning and artificial reproduction become realities. However, this would spark deep moral and ethical debates as society grapples with the need for survival versus moral principles. Over time, the application of cloning and other technologies might become more common, but ethical dilemmas would persist. Society would attempt to balance survival with moral principles. By the end of the century, cloning and artificial reproduction would become routine practices, though moral and ethical questions would still be debated. These technologies would be used to sustain the human population, but many aspects of their use would remain controversial. Economic and labor aspects. The economy would start to undergo changes. Sectors traditionally dominated by women would begin to experience labor shortages. The labor market would be forced to adapt to new conditions. After 10 to 20 years, significant role redistribution would occur. Men would have to take on jobs previously performed by women. Educational and professional programs would be adapted to prepare men for these new roles. The economy would continue to adapt to new conditions. New technologies and automation would help fill the labor gaps in some sectors. Men would occupy more roles that were previously held by women. By the end of the century, the economy would stabilize but would be very different from today's. Automation and technology would play key roles in maintaining production and services. The labor market would be fully adapted to the new reality. Cultural changes. Culture and art would begin to reflect the changes in society. New themes and narratives related to the disappearance of women and its consequences would emerge. Literature, cinema, and music would adapt to the new reality. Within 10 to 20 years, cultural changes would become more noticeable. Gender roles would be reassessed, and new forms of art and expression would become the norm. Society would continue to seek balance and new forms of interaction. Culture would continue to evolve. New forms of art, literature, and music would reflect the changed demographic reality. Traditional gender roles and family concepts would be reevaluated and replaced with new norms. By the end of the century, Culture would be fully adapted to a society composed only of men. New traditions and customs would replace the old ones. Art and culture would continue to evolve, reflecting changes in society and technology. This hypothetical scenario underscores the importance of gender diversity and equality in our society. It reminds us of how much we lose when we lose half of humanity. We hope this analysis has made you think about the importance of every individual in our world. Subscribe to our channel and like our videos to not miss new episodes.